Hey everybody, welcome back to the Renaissance Woodworker. I'm your host, Shannon Rogers. Welcome into my shop, and this is my prototype of my spring pole lathe. And I've been using it quite a lot lately, and it's brought up another need. The best way to use a pole lathe is to prepare your stock first. And that's basically turning into an octagon or a dodecagon so that it's somewhat round, so that it's a little bit easier to get things started. Let's face it, we're providing the horsepower here. So you want the workpiece to be as close to round as it can be, so you're not spending a bunch of time just whittling away at those corners. The best way I know to prepare that is using a draw knife, and the best thing with the draw knife is a shave horse. And I have not built a shave horse for my shop yet because I can always run over to the Stepping Stone Museum where I volunteer and use any of the three we have there. And in fact, that's what I've been doing. I'll take a couple of minutes when I'm there each weekend to prepare some blanks, split them out and then shape them roughly on the shave horse, and then I can work my way through them. Well, I'm getting down to the bottom of my collection here, and I found myself using my draw knife at my bench to round up some more practice blanks. And it's about time for me to build a shave horse, so this can be a lot easier. The problem is, I just don't have the space for another tool in my shop that requires some kind of footprint. So played around with SketchUp a little bit, and I came up with a benchtop version of a shaving horse. And I thought I was very, very witty and decided to call it a shave pony. Well, so much for the original idea, because it turns out there's lots of people who've thought of the shave pony name well before me. And if you were to Google shave pony, you'll find several different designs that are basically the same thing that I just built. So let me show you how I built it and show you how it gets put to work.
So here's my design for the shave pony. This base will rest on my bench top, and I'm going to put a dog hole that will allow me to either slip a holdfast or even just a bench dog through into the bench top to hold it in place. This ramp comes up to about 6 degrees, and this little riser block just fits in to hold it there. This face I'm just going to call the clamp piece. Essentially, as the arms swing forward, this will clamp down and hold whatever your workpiece is securely. It's operated by pushing down on the foot pedal here. This is your pivot point, the axle, and then I've got these different height settings that can be adjusted just by sliding a dowel through the clamp piece and the two arms here. Of course, this block up top just as a spacer to stabilize the arm assembly. And as the thickness of the workpiece changes, you can move this up and down through those various holes. It's basically the top half of a shave horse. Just take the legs and everything out of it and put it on top of a bench.
I just want to lay out my parts here real quickly. My longest pieces are the arms, and that's going to be at 43 inches. So I just want to lay that out with the tape measure and then come over with my square and just work that across. So I'll need to cross cut that off, and I can probably use this for the floating clamp piece. I've flattened this edge with a plane over here, and I've got my panel gauge set to 2.5 inches for my arm. Lay that in, and I should be able to get 2 arms side by side out of this, and then the long base itself. That's going to be 5 inches wide. And then out of this next piece, I've taken my square set to 5 inches, and I'll lay out the ramp part, which is only 30 inches long. And this board is actually 31 inches long. I've got another piece here that actually I can use as my clamp piece. Instead of the offcut, this is going to be about 5¼ inches wide. So I just need to plane it down a little bit, and that'll be ready to go. So it looks like, see, 1 cross cut, 1, 2, 3 rip cuts, and I'll be ready to start putting it together. got all my pieces roughly cut out, and I went ahead and planed down the edges and then just put little chamfers on each of the corners so that they're nice and rounded over. This board started just roughly skip planed from a mill. I'm not going to bother with the faces. I mean, it's going to be a shave horse, so it's not really that big of a deal. So I've got my two 43-inch long by 2.5-inch wide arms. I'll set them aside. And then I've got three 5-inch pieces left over. One is also 43 inches. I could cross-cut it down shorter, but it's not really necessary. This will be the base that goes on the bench top. Then I've got a 30-inch long piece. This will be my ramp that comes up at a 6-degree angle. And then I've got this leftover piece that essentially was just part of this board. When I ripped it down the middle, I had this section left over, and I'm going to use this for the remainder of my parts. I've cross-cut or marked a line here that is the width of my arms, and this is going to be the spacer that goes at the top. Got that. And then I've marked out another piece that is, this is about 10 inches long. The width really is not that, or the length is really not that important. This is going to be the foot pedal. And then what's left over will be the clamping head. And this is probably, it's about 16 inches long, and that'll be just fine. I've got this little chunk of maple that's 1.5 inches thick, and this was left over from another project, and these dimensions actually is what determine the dimensions for everything else. The length of the piece is 5 inches, and this top, or this height here, with a 6-degree angle across it, is actually what determined the length of the riser bed. So I've got my bevel gauge set to 6 degrees, and even that's kind of an arbitrary angle, just something nice and shallow. And I'm going to plane that 6-degree angle into the edge grain. Pretty shallow angle, so it doesn't take a whole lot to get there. Almost there, just a little bit of a high spot right up here. But I've got the angle right, so I can reference the bed off the area that I've already planed to lower that high spot. And that's got it. I've got my riser block screwed into place from the bottom, and I've just got this riser board placed on top, kind of held in place with a hold fast. I've got this cool little scribe here, but any set of dividers or compass will work. And what I'll do is set it so that when I reference it off the bench top, the pencil comes even with the top corner of the riser board. So now, when I ride it along the bench, I'm cutting in the angle of that scarf joint that will allow this piece to mate down at that 6-degree angle while it's mated here at the top of the riser block. I'll just saw this out like I would a tenon. In all honesty, this doesn't have to be, dead accurate. But anytime I build a appliance or jig like this, I like to use it as an opportunity to practice my skills. So sawing out a nice long scarf joint like this is just a good exercise. All right, I'm going to flip this around just so I can make sure I'm on my line on both sides and get a relatively square cut. trace the line across the top and along my line on the other face. All right, let me flip back. Here we go. And I don't have to work real hard to clean this up. I just want to remove any bumps and work to the line up top that I squared across. I've marked a point 6 inches back from the leading edge, transfer that line all the way around and used a scratch awl to mark the point. And I'm going to use a 3/8 inch bit to bore in and bore all the way through. But you can stop periodically and just check it. We're good. I'm not going to drill all the way through, but drill from both sides, meet up somewhere in the middle. And any kind of deviation I get will be on the inside, and it won't make that much of a difference for the axle that we're using here. I'm just using a 3/8 inch threaded rod as my, for lack of a better term, my axle. You can see why transferring that line kind of accurately over to the other side is so important. And we just met up in the middle. And just like we did for the axle and the base, I want to drill the same 3/8 inch hole through the clamp block. And I'm going to do it exactly the same way by drilling in from both sides so that any deviation will meet in the middle. Taking the two arms and clamp them together and then use the holdfast to attach them down to the bench. Marked out the center point 7 inches down from the top and used a scratch awl to mark a point right there. Now I came up and I marked a line from the back edge. I marked it 1 3/4 inches. So it's a 1/2 inch further forward from the center point where the axle comes through. And this 1/2 inch deviation is what allows the clamp block to come down and clamp the piece. Drag that line down here and then space down 2 inches from the top and then 1 inch down to 6 inches. So I have 5 different adjustment holes, 5 different settings for different thicknesses of projects. So now I'm going to use the same 3/8 inch bit to bore through both of these pieces at once so that I can get them aligned properly. Just drill all these out, and then I'll flip it over and use the lead screw point that just poked through to kind of clean it up and get a nice exit hole on both sides. Then I'll come back with a countersink bit and just counterbore these holes just to prevent any kind of splintering. I'm sure for this entire build you could use all kinds of fancy joinery, but truly for the light duty that this shaving pony is going to get, screws are perfect. And I'm not going to use any glue because things might break and I might need to replace a part later on. But to be perfectly honest, I have every intention of building a shave horse one of these days, and I've got all kinds of great ideas and designs really kind of based off of the people who have come before me. So there's no reason to over-engineer this. This should just be a quick couple-hour project. Okay, and the arm assembly is together. Now I should say one thing. The pedal and the spacer block up top, you notice they came out of the exact same board, so that when I cross-cut them and I screw them together, I assure that I've got a square assembly. Also, this board was made to be just a hair wider, about 1/16 of an inch wider than my bed pieces. That way, the bed pieces will slide in between them without a whole lot of, without bowing the piece out at all. You want a little bit of wiggle room in between this. Okay, so here's the deal. I screwed this down. I screwed the ramp down to the base, screwed the riser block in place, and screwed the ramp down to the riser block. I've just got a brass rod here. It's 3/8 inch brass rod that will slip into any of these adjustable holes, and it changes the pivot point of, we're just going to call this the clamp. I've got a 3/8 inch threaded rod and nylon lock bolts that feed it through and allow it to pivot on its axis. One thing I did is I used a rat tail file. It worked into these holes from both sides just to kind of clean out any kind of stickiness in the middle where the drill bits met, so that the rods so that this will, especially the brass rod, will slide in and out easily. You don't want this to be hard to adjust. In other words, you don't want to have to use a hammer or something to knock it through. I can use bench dogs just to clamp it down to my bench. I have a row of dog holes in the back of my bench, and since I'm just going to be working with shorter pieces right now, I can just use a holdfast through one of those holes, and it clamps everything down. I do have the ability to kind of pivot it slightly from left to right, but since all the pressure is in line with that dog hole, this holds it very, very firmly. So I can take any of these pieces and essentially round it to be worked in the spring pole lathe. So this is up on the 3rd notch. This is probably about that's about right for that piece. I can push that pedal and just work these corners down into an octagon or a dodecagon, whatever you want, just to get it ready to more easily turn in the lathe. This is a bit of a thicker piece. If I bring the smaller one in, it doesn't clamp. In fact, my pedal will hit my bench. Now I could position this any old place so that it wouldn't bump into the legs, but what you do is I'll drop this down to the 2nd notch, or 2nd hole rather, and this clamps everything down even closer. I barely have to push the pedal now, and I'm securely clamping this piece. I can flip it around, pull those corners off, and I can actually get this almost round really quickly, actually. And this is now ready to be chucked up in the lathe. If I've got a square piece, and this is what we're really talking about, starting with square stock, I've got quite a bit of flexibility. Let's take this up to the 4th hole here and see if that'll do. Oh. Might work, but I think it'll be better on the 3rd hole. Perfect. So now I can clamp it and pull the corners off pretty easily here. And this can rough things up pretty quickly. One thing I think I'll do is probably take a V-gouge and just cut a V-groove in both the base and the clamp block here. That will allow me to stand it up on the corner and work the corner directly. The best setting and for the best hold on this is when you can slide the workpiece just under the brass bar. I've got next to no play under the brass bar, so now the clamp block is actually parallel to the bed. This gives you kind of the most maximum hold, the biggest surface area here. And ultimately, I've got a lot of space here that I could take very long objects. Reality is, how long of an object you're really going to need in here. If I'm making chair legs or something like that, at most table legs, they're probably 36 inches long. And that's really the perfect length, to the point where this comes back and it levels out. Something real longer than this might face a little bit of resistance as this bed flattens out. But I've got a full 30 inches here to play with. And if I had a 36-inch leg, obviously that would give me 6 inches out here in front of the jaws, and I would probably want more than that so that I can work more of the exposed face. So this is my shave pony. It's going to make a nice stopgap solution until I can build a more dedicated shave horse. So I think I'm going to round up some more practice stock and get back to the lathe. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.